in the midst of all of this chaos, the suppression of the markets make gold and silver an afterthought to the financial advisories. And they look at it as something that, why would anyone do that? But why would the central banks of the world massively accumulate it? Why are the commercial banks massively accumulating it? Why are the sovereign wealth funds and the family offices bleeding dry the exchanges? Why are the authorized participants bleeding dry the exchanges right now from the London Metals Exchange to the COMEX to the ETFs? Why is this happening if gold and silver are an afterthought?
Hi, I'm Kaiser Johnson with Liberty in Finance, and this is the Miles Franklin Weekly Special for September 20th through September 27th, 2022. This week we have two specials. First, 10-ounce silver bars made by the Swiss Valcambi mint. These 3/9 fine bars are cast, not pressed, have a unique graduated rectangle shape, and carry an individual serial number. Best of all, they're available at only $3.59 over spot while supplies last. We also feature this week the 2022 Silver Britannia, which will likely be the last Britannia coin to feature Queen Elizabeth II. Made by the Royal Mint in the United Kingdom, the Britannia is 3/9 fine, comes in tubes of 25, monster boxes of 500, and is available for $5.50 over spot while supplies last. All of our specials this week are IRA eligible, and if you'd like to learn more about a precious metals IRA, call us, and we'll be happy to help you in that process. Our phone number for all orders is 1-888-81-LIBERTY. That's 1-888-815-4237. We're available after hours and on weekends, and we look forward to speaking with you.
Welcome back to Liberty in Finance. We're delighted to have this returning guest every Tuesday for our weekly market update. Andy Schectman is the CEO of Miles Franklin Precious Metals. He joins us again this September 20th, 2022. Andy, thanks for coming back on Liberty in Finance.
Always good to see you, Dunnigan. These Tuesdays just seem to roll on faster and faster and faster. I wake up one morning and it's Tuesday. It seems like Groundhog all over again.
Yeah. It's about every 3 days, isn't it? It's Tuesday.
Yeah, it feels that way. It does. It feels that way.
Well, I wanted to address with you a few topics that clients have been asking on a recurring basis with increasing frequency, as there seems to be these growing storm clouds, and people are, you see animals acting different before a big storm comes, and it just seems like people are starting to, as you have said, trust their gut, and they're sensing a brewing storm, that we're just coming into something big. And some people say later this month, September yet, some people say October, some people say within the next quarter or two, but there seems to be, more than I ever recall, this growing sentiment that something big and serious is coming our way. And in the face of that, people are trying to position themselves to be ready to do the right thing when that comes, whether it's to move out of harm's way or whether it's to take advantage of opportunities that may present themselves and try to make a strategic move, a tactical move when the time comes. So that's one of the things I want to talk to you about, if you could. And we talked about it briefly last time because we talked about the number of people that are sensing or hearing or planning. What they hear from analysts is that there's likely to be a major market meltdown, smackdown, whatever you want to call it, correction, both in the stock markets, perhaps the bond market, the real estate market, and the metals markets. And so they're thinking, gee, maybe I can get metals at a sharp discount if I just keep my powder dry and bide my time. Any additional words of wisdom you have for people who are sensing this coming brewing storm and trying to make sure that they're positioned ahead of that so that they benefit from it at best and at least don't get hurt badly by it?
Look, I think that this market collapse is long overdue. This market correction is long overdue. I wonder if the mainstream really feels that there's this imminent event that's going to happen. I certainly echo what you've been saying here with the people that I talk to, thinking sometime at the end of September or into October that we would see some sort of an event that I guess in many respects is probably long overdue. When you have assets as elevated as they are, all inversely correlated to a rise in rates, and a Federal Reserve that claims that they're going to continue to get tougher and tougher and tougher on inflation, that they're going to actually start to quantitatively tighten. I think that there's no question that everyone should be kind of on alert or keeping an eye on the movements of the Fed, or just simply get out of harm's way while they can and sit on the sidelines. I don't think there's anything wrong with taking a position on the sideline and let everyone else duke this out and, try to fight the Fed. They say you shouldn't ever try and fight the Fed. My question has always been, is the Fed actually going to come to the fight, or are they just jawboning and positioning themselves in a manner that really won't allow them to cross that line of tightening so much and raising rates so much that things start to break? And you can see that even to this point, the market doesn't believe that they are going to enter the ring, as you see still this massive inversion in the yield curve where you're getting, a rate on the 1-year Treasury note almost equal to the 30-year bond. Something's very wrong with that in terms of this inversion. So I guess that certainly remains to be seen. But certainly the people that we talk to every day feel that there is some event coming, and I couldn't agree more. When you talk about metals selling off along with everything else, look, they have in the past when there has been a market collapse, like we saw in March as an example of 2020, metal sold off with it. When we saw the great financial crisis in 2008, metals sold off with it. Now, the popular or the conventional wisdom is that this is the baby being thrown out with the bathwater to meet margin call requirements. I have always kind of wondered if that was really the case, or that was more cartel management, if you will, kind of damage control. The worst thing that you could see happening in conjunction with a massive market sell-off and chaos, panic and fear would be gold and silver accentuating themselves the way one might think they would in that environment. But by the same token, it's interesting because one would think that gold and silver represent the safety from that event. And the last few market sell-offs that we've seen of any significance have shown us that indeed gold and silver is being sold off, but often turns right around and goes right back up. In the case of 2008, it fell, and then over the next ensuing 3 years reached its all-time high in 2011, up to that point of almost $2,000 gold and $50 silver. If we look at what happened in March, when silver fell all the way off to $11 an ounce, it tripled in a matter of just a few months after that. So whether or not we see this sell-off is debatable. Whether or not it truly is people throwing out the baby with the bathwater to meet margin requirements is debatable, or whether or not it is the cartel doing damage control is debatable. All of these things certainly are debatable, but we are entering a period of time where I think, ignoring that possibility of it being sold off or cost averaging your position into that environment would be a better way than waiting for that environment and hoping that you are able to cherry pick a bottom. Now, look, there's a very strong possibility that event may mark the bottom of the sell-off in metals. It very well may. It has in the past. But by the same token, I don't know that that's really a wise thing to do this time. When you look at the positioning right now of the commercial banks, which have really been positioning for a rise in the metals, at least in terms of where they are on COMEX, when you look at the massive drawdown in physical metal that we've seen off of the world's exchanges and the backdooring out of the world's ETFs by the authorized participants, it would signal as though that the big money is preparing for said event and is positioning themselves in the world bullion markets for this type of an event. So, there's a lot of confusion these days, Dunnigan, and I think the moral of the story is trying to outsmart the markets probably isn't going to work. You might get lucky if you do, but I think instead people who are uncertain about how this all plays out, rather than waiting for this moment and hoping that things play to a certain script or a narrative, I think is probably not the best idea right now, especially based upon the positioning of the big money and the drawdown of physical metal. but rather to cost average a position. If you're thinking of adding money right now, maybe break it up into 2 or 3 tranches and cost average your position over the next 30 days or so and see what happens. See if the public on this side of the ledger who is expecting this event, see if it happens. See if gold and silver do sell off. If it does, you'll have some dry powder. If it doesn't, and the commercial banks are positioned correctly, and the people who have been drawing down from the exchanges have been doing this to get into position in a proactive fashion, maybe they're right, because one of these times they will be right. So rather than betting your whole stack of chips, if you will, on one outcome, cost averaging and mitigating, if you will, the risk and the uncertainty is probably a good way to play this right now. I think it's probably better than betting on one side or the other.
Yeah, the nature of the event that people are anticipating, it's kind of under the cloud of this overall market downturn that people are expecting. But there's a wide variety of variations on the story that people are anticipating that they've talked about. Some people are expecting a big event prior to the midterm elections, something that would cause such a huge crisis or such a huge disruption that it would seriously impair the ability of the elections to proceed in an orderly manner, whether that's a cyber attack that makes the internet and remote voting, impossible, that sort of thing. Other people have talked about a historic 7-year cycle of debt jubilees or a Shemitah event. If you could talk to us about what that is that people are talking about. And other people are saying, no, this whole new financial system, Nasara Jassara, based on quantum computing, is going to just displace everything, and the people are going to win, and the bankers are going to lose out. And other people are saying, no, Trump's going to be reinstated because the government, the military's been waiting in the wings, and they're just going to put him back in. And all kinds of different things, but there's all these different stories just swirling. And the common thread is a huge disruption that will have financial impact on people's lives. Any of those narratives that you care to comment on before we move on?
I've always had a hard time believing in the concept of Nasara and Jassara. I know a lot of people are very, very adamant about this being a possibility. And I guess it's important to take a step back and realize that, everyone, that someone's debt is someone else's asset, and not everyone who has assets is a bad guy. Imagine that you scraped and worked your whole life to own an apartment building, 10-unit apartment building that represents your life's work, and now you're just going to be screwed, I guess you could say, for lack of a better explanation, if all debt is forgiven. And no, I don't think that'll really happen. I do think that the narrative of the banks being gone is a possibility. Why? Well, look, as extreme as that really sounds, you got the second in charge at the Fed. I think her name is Lael Brainerd. And her whole premise, I thought she was going to win the seat for the Federal Reserve. But Powell was reelected, and she was, I believe, put in as vice chair. Her whole premise, her whole thesis that she wrote a paper on was about removal of the commercial banks and dealing directly with the central bank, the Fed. A Fed coin, removal of cash, a cashless society where a monetary policy would then be stripped from the commercial banks and given to the Federal Reserve so that they could enact monetary policy directly to the public through their smartphone. Is that a possibility? Sure. When this all breaks apart, why not? I mean, if she was running on that platform for the Fed seat, why is that not a possibility? When they tell us that they've been working on central bank digital currency technology for quite some time, when you see it beginning to accentuate itself in China with the digital yuan. So some of these outcomes certainly could come together, but I think, the idea of all personal debt being wiped away, I think, is not a good way to base your future decisions on, not a good plan to base your future decisions on. But what could you see a massive collapse in the dollar and interest rates spiking and the markets really break down and collapse? Could you see debt forgiveness on a big level with governments forgiving one another? I guess it's a possibility. I just have a hard time believing it in that, debt is one thing, but Someone's debt is someone else's asset. And that's the important thing to take away from it. All of these things have been bantered around for quite some time. And I think it would be a mistake to base your future, if you will, upon these types of decisions, as there's a part of me, the cynic in me, believes that most of it won't come to fruition. However, a lot of the things on the periphery may, like a central bank digital currency, like ultimately maybe they do get rid of the commercial banks so that the Fed can enact monetary policy to the public. Maybe they do start to move away from cash and start to slowly move to a cashless society. Yeah, these are all things that I think are possible. And I was talking about that in March of 2020 when Nancy Pelosi came out in her subcommittee House Finance bill and said viruses can live on paper currency. That to me was Pandora's box being open. That to me was, yeah, we're moving in that direction. Little by little, they drop breadcrumbs. But look, I think you hope for the best to prepare for the worst. And a lot of these things that you see talked about in a fringe narrative, maybe they will come to pass. But I think you can't base your decisions in such a very high stakes game based upon fringe maybes, rather than, I think, if it happens, great. If not, you still are moving to protect yourself and your family in an orderly fashion based upon the information that is right in front of us right now.
Yeah, one of the things that concerns me the most about people who give too much credence to these scenarios and these narratives is that they can be paralyzed and immobilized. I feel like that these things would be so much a game changer that, as opposed to, we've talked about this before, as opposed to moving your pieces on the chessboard, it's like somebody's going to come and knock the whole chessboard over. So how do you want to be positioned just in case that happens? And that's a reasonable question to ask from a preparedness standpoint: is what would my world look like, and what would my plan be if this, and my plan B be if the entire economy, the entire financial and monetary edifice that we assume is there for us when we wake up in the morning wasn't there one day, and what would I do? And so that brings a lot of preparedness topics up, that kind of thing. But for someone to, my concern is when people feel paralyzed. I had a gentleman who has a multi-million-dollar property he'd like to sell in San Francisco. He's afraid to sell it now, even though he thinks he should, because he sees the market is rolling over and he wishes he had sold it a few months ago. But he's afraid if he sells it now, he'd get caught in the middle of this Shemitah debt forgiveness jubilee, and he'll end up with nothing. And so he just feels like, somebody tell me what to do, and feels like no matter what he does, these powers that be that are bigger than him are going to invalidate any reasonable action he takes, because they're going to just change the game in some way that no one can anticipate. That feeling of bewilderment, and that can lead to paralysis, to where people feel like they can't take any action because the game might change, is really disempowering, and it doesn't help us to take concrete steps forward in preparedness.
No, and that's what I'm talking about. You can't sit and be paralyzed with uncertainty and fear based upon the what if. You have to, I think, make your decisions based upon the what is, and what you have directly in front of you. And so, I mean, granted, the world is changing. This is something that I've been talking about for a very long time with you. I see a pattern of change, and it's not emanating as much from the white hats, as people would like to call them, or the good guys trying to level the playing field. And I think people need to take a step back and say, well, what would the world look like if all debt was invalidated, and what would the world look like if if we just basically went on all of our commitments, said, sorry, we're resetting. That's not how it works, I think. And I think the unintended consequences there would be pretty severe on a global scale. But I think to a degree, you're seeing this happen maybe more on a organic level, as we've talked about with what's happening in the BRICS nations and all of the forces that are moving against the West, which could very quickly render, in my opinion, that reset that everyone thinks is going to happen as a result of the good guys just coming in and leveling the playing field, or creating something like Nasara Jassara. No, I don't think it'll happen that way. I think the market is going to dictate what happens. But look, I think these are deals where if you are waiting for this event and not doing what you should be doing, you're making a mistake. That's the easiest way I can explain it. I think that the old adage, prepare for the worst, hope for the best. But if you're sitting on a piece of property in a place like San Francisco and you want to get out and you think you should get out and you should get out, not doing it because you think your money may get tied up in the bank for an event like that, I think is the wrong way to approach it. Because if something like that happens anyway, what does it say for the value of your home, after the fact? So these are tough times, tough decisions, but I would say probably wrong to base your movements upon that. I think you will be surprised, maybe pleasantly or maybe not so pleasantly, if it does happen. But you move upon the rules of the game that are right in front of you right now, and that's the only thing you can do. And if you're concerned about it, then move in double time and get this done right away and try to expedite the process. Maybe that means dropping your price and incentivizing someone to pay you cash right now instead of waiting and hoping for a smooth settlement in 60 or 90 days and losing sleep the whole way.
So along the way of this awakening that people have been doing, perceiving, going from the sleepwalking that 99.5% of the people are doing, where they don't perceive the counterparty risk that they actually are subject to starting to perceive the layers and layers of counterparty risk that we actually all are subject to. Usually one of the first things people come to along that journey, coming up that learning curve, is that the US dollar is not to be trusted, that really the dollar ain't what it used to be, and it won't buy what it used to. It isn't constitutional. It isn't our grandparents' dollar anymore. It's a corruption. It's a debasement of what it should have been, and it is not a safe place to keep your wealth, because it will. That's what Rick Rule says. He says the only guarantee I can give you is that if you keep your entire nest egg in US dollars, I guarantee you the government will take your money away from you every single year, every day. So that's one guarantee. The other thing people are waking up to is the risk of banking. If they know anything about the history of banks in the U.S., or especially the Dodd-Frank Act of 2010, where the Fed said, well, not the Fed, but the banks got together and got this legislation passed through Congress that said, okay, the government's not going to bail out the banks. Next time it's going to be the depositors. So that's where we had an interview that came out of that saying nothing in the banks is yours, that every deposit in checking, savings, certificate of deposit, and even the contents of safe deposit boxes in a bank are not yours. So people are waking up to that. Okay, that's not a safe place to keep your funds. Then they're waking up to market risk. I really do think over the last 9 months, we've seen these rolling over of the stock market, and now the real estate market is starting to show susceptibility to the rising interest rates, that sort of thing. So people are waking up, oh, markets don't always just go up like they have for 40 years. I am subject to risk there, so I'm waking up to that. But just today, I had a question, very sincere question from a gentleman this morning who said, so I understand there's dollar risk, I understand there's bank risk and market risk, but like if I'm trying to get into mining stocks and I have that in a stock brokerage, and he named a big name stock brokerage, he said, it just occurred to me when I went to send a wire from the bank that it went through this big name brokerage. And he said, so if there were a derivatives implosion, credit market lockup, the banking system got in trouble, would that mean that brokerages get in trouble too? And I said, oh, you haven't heard the story that I've told several times on here about how we're still waiting to be made whole by a TD Ameritrade for a damage that we got to us back in 2008 after the Lehman Brothers collapse, even though we weren't invested in Lehman Brothers, et cetera. We were in a money market fund. So absolutely, any thoughts that you have on the reality of counterparty risk that people need to be aware of and wake up to? Just kind of smell the coffee and then take action and don't wait.
Yeah, I mean, the systemic risk of if there was a major problem with a large bank or a reinsurance company like AIG, I think the whole world is incestuously tied together nowadays, at least from a financial perspective. And one needs to wonder, why did they implement bail-ins after the great financial crisis in 2009, if not to expect something down the road that, okay, fine, the taxpayer no longer is on the hook, but the depositors are. Why implement money market gating, which you're talking about with Lehman Brothers, where many of the money markets were invested with Lehman Brothers during the great financial crisis, and as Lehman Brothers locked up, many of the money markets that were invested with them started to go upside down. It's called breaking the buck. So now they have gating legislations in place. And so, yeah, I think when you talk about, just the systemic nature of everything that is interrelated, these are problems. These are issues that we've never had to confront or never had to deal with. And, you ask your broker, your money manager about this, they'll tell you you're crazy, obviously. But you wouldn't have been so crazy if you asked that question in 2009. And, I often talk about the decision that I made in 2009 to sell my IRA. Now, this is a little stretch from what you're asking about, but I sold my IRA in 2009 and paid a 10% penalty and a hefty income tax on receiving the income from the IRA, because when all of this happened, immediately there was a bill introduced that made it to the House floor that talked about taking people's IRAs to support what would be a plunging bond market and escalating interest rates. And so at the time, just goes to show you how fast the debt has grown. In 2009, I believe the debt was 17 trillion to where it is now at 30 trillion, which matched at the time almost to the dollar the amount of money in U.S. IRAs of roughly 17 trillion. And the thought was, hey, we'll take everyone's IRAs, we'll put it into an annuity backed by U.S. Treasuries to guarantee made by the U.S. government on principal in dollars, which they can print out of nowhere, of course. The point of it is that, they're thinking ahead, and we're not. We're very reactionary, yet you can see that the government has thought ahead. Why has Social Security and the IRS bought AR-15s and, and millions of rounds of ammunition? Why are these things being put into place years before there's ever a problem, or long before there's even the thought of a problem, like in 2009? Why did they make these changes to the laws, if not for it to be a possibility? And the reason that all of these things are bantered back and forth, and we talk about the possibilities, that they all center back to one thing, and that's mathematics. The mathematics of this escalating problem in our obligations, many of which were accumulated at amongst the lowest interest rates ever in this country, it's going to become a problem. And I think, you have a situation where half of the world feels that the fundamental principles of justice and equality don't apply to the West. And the rest of the world is using this as a rallying cry against the West. And I think that this is what is going to precipitate a problem as more and more and more of human population begins to look at the West, not only as the entity that created the problem, but the entity that has been hypocritical in their actions and in their reactions. And so I think the bottom line is to focus too much on what is happening here is ignoring what is happening around the rest of the world. And this massive groundswell of humanity, which is representing 85 to 90% of human population, I think is really what people need to focus on. And the things that we're talking about, I think, are all realities, but I don't think they're going to be made real by actions made by our government or actions made by the white hats, this group of good guys that are trying to, cleanse the system. Any way you look at it, as far as I'm concerned, there is risk. It's very systemic. It's very incestual. It's very tied together. There's risk in being in a bank account. There's risk of leaving anything in a safe deposit box, which isn't insured. There's risk in leaving your funds in a brokerage account. And I think that day by day, those risks get greater. At some point, you have to live, and you have to live within the system that you are in. But if you have concerns and you have this gnawing feeling that something just isn't right and that something is going to break, then you have to be proactive. You cannot be reactionary. Now, I'm not saying that this is going to happen or that it's going to happen tomorrow. A lot of people are, and a lot of people feel that way. If you do feel that way, then the worst thing that you can do is be reactionary, and the worst thing that you can do is be paralyzed. The best thing that you can do is take accountability for your own decisions and your own actions. Research, study like you and I do, Dunnigan, and try and get as much information as you can upon what's truly happening, and then make a decision with all of the facts that you've put together, and let it be one that you're in your heart you're good with. And I'll tell you something, when it doesn't work out, but yet you've thought it through, you researched it, studied, and thought it through, it's a lot easier to be wrong than it is to listen to someone who told you to do something that in your heart you knew wasn't right. And if you're proven to be right, yet you're wrong because you didn't do anything about it, you listened to someone else who talked you out of it, it's really going to bum you out. So I think we take accountability for our actions. And right now it's never been more important, because on every level, we are in uncharted waters, whether you're talking economically, morally, socially, just what's happening in this country, politically, the divisiveness, everything seems to be different. And this is why people are feeling the way that they do, because this isn't the country that a lot of us remember just a few years ago, just based upon the divisiveness of opinion, where you can't have a conversation with a family member or a friend if they wear a blue shirt and you wear a red, or vice versa. If you don't believe in vaccines and your neighbor does, how do you feel sitting at a picnic with your neighbor at a block party and that conversation comes up? The point of it is that everything seems to be more tense and like a tight spring wound. I think that it's time right now. The bottom line is, the answer to all of this is there is no proper answer in front of us. So you do what your gut tells you and you be good with it. You make peace with it. And if that means moving everything into precious metals, so be it. If that means selling your brokerage accounts and sitting on the sidelines, okay, in a money market, knowing what the risks are, then that's great. Whatever it is, take some accountability, because the people who you ask, especially most financial advisories, are not equipped to answer these types of questions, and they've never had any reason to be. And if your advisor is equipped to speak intelligently about this, then hang on to that guy or gal with both hands, because you have someone who is truly giving you advice based upon not just the tiny spectrum of securities that most advisories tell you is the road to retirement. I think that a true advisor would understand that these are times that we've never seen before, and that the likelihood of there being some major upheaval or development that could affect you materially, it's growing by the day. So what the answer is, I have no idea. I would just simply say, for me, that answer is to have gotten out of harm's way of traditional assets. Have I been wrong for a period of time? Absolutely, I have. But in the end, when the music stops, I think being wrong the whole way, yeah, it stings a little bit, but it will save your life if you're right when the music stops. And that's my own personal way of dealing with this. It's not for everybody. But I'll tell you one thing, I've taken accountability for my own actions, and I sleep well at night. And that's the most important thing, is peace of mind and sleep at night. And whatever allows you to get there, that's the right answer, because we are all facing the same, the same edifice of uncertainty that seems to be growing every single day, and also accelerating in terms of the anxiety that comes along with it.
Yeah, and accelerating in terms of the milestones that we're passing at increasing frequency. Both Rob Kirby, rest his soul, as well as Alistair McLeod talk about how we're passing these milestones at a faster and faster clip. You, on the main stage in your keynote address at the Rural Symposium on Natural Resource Investing in Boca Raton, Florida, a couple months ago, really got the attention of that crowd and have been invited all over the internet to do follow-on talks about that topic of the East-West split. It's been termed the Eastern Bretton Woods or Asian Bretton Woods, that sort of thing. If you could bring us up to date on the latest signposts that you've observed just in this past week or two that are on your radar screen as far as further evidence that we are hurtling in that direction.
Yeah, we're seeing dignitaries from China, including Xi himself, meet with Russia. And, there's a gentleman, his name is Li Zhanshu. Of course, I've butchered the heck out of that, but he is way high up in the Chinese Communist Party. And in meeting in closed door sessions with with the Russians, he basically gave support for the war with the Ukraine, and more or less said, in a nutshell, that Russia is dealing with its own national security, and that China fully understands the necessity of the measures taken by Russia. Now, this was behind closed doors, and Russia actually not only published what he said, but aired the video of it or the audio of it. And I don't know if that was to the chagrin of the Chinese or not, but you're seeing, again, this coalition. We've seen 68 countries gather in the Eastern Economic Forum in Russia, which just happened. And the takeaway from this was that, look, Russia will defend its sovereign interests, that as they call it, Western sanction fever is threatening the world, and that economic crises are not going away after the pandemic. And the West has no position or is in no position to dictate energy prices to Russia, that the ruble and the yuan will be used for gas payments, and that the role of Asia Pacific has really significantly increased. And in a nutshell, basically what all of this was getting at is that Asia is the new epicenter of technological progress and productivity. And, you got the Shanghai Cooperation Summit coming up in a week or two. More and more and more and more you're seeing of these countries coming together. There was a big deal made at this meeting about the Russia Central Asia transport that we've talked about, this north-south corridor that it goes between Russia, Iran, and India. And the deals that are being made between these countries, and where India comes out publicly and says that they support the Russian concept of a greater Eurasian partnership. And it's engaged in setting up trade agreements with the EAEU, as they put it. They said, look, the growth rate of the BRICS nations is predicted not only by them but by the IMF should be responsible for up to 50% of global trade within the next several years. Now, this is exactly what I've been talking about. Now, I would just like to read one thing here. Let me pull it up. This is at this meeting. Vladimir Putin got on and he basically said that the obsolete unipolar model being replaced by a new world order, as well as the recognition of each state and people to their own sovereign path of development, powerful political and economic centers are taking shape right here in the Asia Pacific region, acting as a driving force for this irreversible process. What he's saying is that they're moving against the West and they are coalescing all of these countries. And look, this coalition is being done against this rallying cry of, they call it sanction fever, this rallying cry against the Western hypocrisy and hegemony. And that is the rallying cry. But as we've talked about last week, they've publicly come out and said that they are going to issue a new world reserve currency and it will be pegged to a basket of commodities. So they're doing it the right way. Not only is there a rallying cry against the West and the Western hypocrisy and hegemony, but they will back it by commodities for each country so that there is equality in this new system. Equality not based upon where you fit into the group in terms of when you join the group or what position you've been promoted to within the group, or like the European Union, where you have some countries pulling in different directions. But this will be one based upon what you've contributed to the new system, with the rallying cry being, look what the West is doing. Not only are they imposing hypocritical sanctions on the world after they've gone and what they've done in Iraq and Libya and Syria, but they are also going to make sure everyone brings a certain amount to the table so that, yes, there is something that holds us all together in terms of our coalescence against the Western hypocrisy. But that's not enough to make the system work. The system has to work by what we are all pledging to the system. And I think that's what you take away from it. And every single day, there are more stories like this, the meeting where you basically got India coming out and striking deals with Iran, striking deals with Russia, selling all of their goods in rupee, doing international trade and domestic trade, settling it in rupee, not in dollars anymore. These things keep happening faster and faster and faster and faster. And I'm sure next week, after we see what comes out of the Shanghai summit, there'll be more things to talk about. But all following this same thread of global de-dollarization and a cohesive one group message of, hey, it's our turn to have our moment in the sun, and let's all rally against the West and the hypocrisy of their sanctions, of their actions, and the debasement of the world reserve currency, and the manipulation of the world's markets by the COMEX. When you talk about the Moscow Metals Exchange that is now getting more and more and more traction, I mean, look, at some point, if that really does take shape and they peg gold at $2,500 an ounce right out the gate and silver at $40-50 an ounce right out the gate, it completely breaks the Western system and creates a tremendous amount of I think, incentive for anyone who's holding contracts on the West to immediately move everything they have and move everything to the East, to a system that is going to fairly value the prices, because even the Wall Street traders who have no interest in gold have to know that the Western markets are suppressed and manipulated, that the metals markets are manipulated. They have to know it. Everyone has to know it by now, after JP Morgan and their traders are facing jail time and have pled guilty to suppression of the market. So if we all know it, and even the people on Wall Street who aren't invested in precious metals or really not interested in them, I guarantee you that the folks in the East, who are the largest accumulators and producers of commodities in the world, not just gold and silver, but all commodities. Heck, cocoa is suppressed almost as much as silver is. So the suppression on the Western markets, where the contracts dictate the prices, where the paper dictates the prices instead of it being the underlying commodity dictating the prices, is a big problem. And I think that is the next shoe to fall, because when that happens, at least in terms of how it relates to our industry, that arbitrage potential, when Moscow sets a real price, and look, that real price is going to benefit the Eurasian continent, the ones that have been producing and accumulating all of the commodities. When that happens, it's a switch that gets flipped that will happen so fast because what will happen is that the urge to arbitrage would be so severe that it would bleed dry all of the available stock in the markets. Question is, do the exchanges in self-protection mode make that illegal, no longer allow deliveries? And at that point, you have just ruined the credibility of the exchange in and of itself by force majeure. So whether it be by hook or crook, I think ultimately and mathematically, these things are going to happen. And this goes back to what you were saying at the very beginning. There is no script for this. There's no certainty, but the mathematics, the logic, and just the very fact that we have, I think, kind of outlived our good graces and are maybe even making them worse by the day in terms of international, the way that the world views the West internationally. I think that it's happening, and it's happening in real time right in front of us. So if you feel that way, then take accountability and do what you think needs to be done. Don't ask for advice from anyone else. Just follow your gut. And for me, that path has been to get out of harm's way, not only of dollar-based assets, but of the U.S. dollar. I am not the poster child for Finance 101. And I don't tell people to follow my model, but I'll tell you something. I sleep like a baby knowing that the majority of all my assets are held in physical precious metals in vaults around the world. I feel very, very comfortable being honest with people and saying that, yeah, this is unconventional, but unconventional times like we have right now call for unconventional thought and action. And the worst thing that you can do is say, I knew I should have done that. I didn't have the courage to act, but I knew I should have. In a period of great uncertainty like that, that's the best advice I can give anyone. And it's advice that has to first resonate with you personally before you go to anyone and ask advice about it. Take it from someone who's had to deal with this type of thought process for 30 years, where gold and silver have been an afterthought by the mainstream. And in the midst of all of this chaos, the suppression of the markets, make gold and silver an afterthought to the financial advisories. And they look at it as something that, why would anyone do that? But why would the central banks of the world massively accumulate it? Why are the commercial banks massively accumulating it? Why are the sovereign wealth funds and the family offices bleeding dry the exchanges? Why are the authorized participants bleeding dry the exchanges right now from the London Metals Exchange to the COMEX to the ETFs? Why is this happening if gold and silver are an afterthought? And goes right back to what we've always talked about, the art of war, Sun Tzu, misdirection. The smartest money in the world understands the connectivity of the world and how fast information is disseminated to the public. And that means if you disseminate BS information to the public, it will be embraced and accepted and run cover for the smart money, who is doing exactly what most advisories would tell you is insane. Purchasing a whole bunch of physical metals and taking possession, pulling it off the exchanges. Well, your financial advisor will tell you, why would you do that? But why are the most well-funded, well-informed, sophisticated investors on the planet doing it? Why are the commercial banks going long in COMEX futures? Why are all of these things happening under the surface? And I think that's what allows me to sleep well at night, knowing that I don't care what conventional wisdom is. I see what the biggest money in the world has been doing for a long time. And I see what 90% of the world is doing in a coalesced, a grouping of countries that are standing up for the first time against the West. And I think they are gaining traction. And that's why I do what I do. So, I don't know if that gives any clarity or not. Then again, these are confusing times. I guess the only thing I can say to people is take accountability. It's time to take accountability for yourself. And, like you have done again, for a very long time, like I do. And that is make decisions for yourself independent of what other people tell you to do.
One of the key and critical aspects that you described of that Eastern emerging coalescence of countries is this focus on tangibles with intrinsic value, whether it's commodities, precious metals, etc. And that's where Gregor Mannarino, other guests of ours have said, become your own central bank. Basically, do what they do, don't do as they say. So for people who watch this channel and are trying to wake up and trying to get ahead of that curve, trying to get out of harm's way and want to increase their stake in tangibles that have intrinsic value, you continually bring forward each week a way that they can do that at an extremely competitive price, a very low entry bar to be able to do that and start doing that or increase doing that if they've already done it. What do you have for us this week in terms of a weekly special?
We're going to continue with more or less the same special that we had last week, which is the Valcambi 10-ounce silver bar, and amongst another two that we have. The Valcambi 10-ounce silver bar is I think the neatest 10-ounce bar I've ever seen. They come in boxes of 50. You don't have to buy them that way, but they do come in sealed mint boxes from the Valcambi mint in Switzerland. It's about a 70-year-old Swiss refinery, one of the most respected in the industry. Those are $3.59 over the price of silver per ounce. And I promise you, they are amongst the neatest bars I've ever seen. And I'm fairly certain that will be amongst the very, very best price in North America. I've looked around and haven't seen anyone even really close to it. And then, of course, we have the last of our in-stock 2022 United Kingdom Britannias at $5.50 over the price of silver, with the Queen dying. This will be the last series of any coins that are run with her effigy on it. And of course, obviously, the United Kingdom being the ones that I think have the most demand. I think we have only about 13,000 of them left in stock. After that, getting them is next to impossible. I haven't seen anyone offering them at this point. They've all been gobbled up. And, if we do sell out of those, keep in mind we have some kangaroos, we have some Canadian maple leafs. Those also have the effigy of Queen Elizabeth. But the special this week will be on the UK Britannia, $5.50 over spot. They are in stock for immediate delivery. And I think if anyone's looking for something that would be a unique piece of, from a historical perspective, certainly the last issue of the coins that have Queen Elizabeth's effigy on it. Next going to be King Charles is something neat to own. And those come in tubes of 25 and boxes of 500, and they are in stock for immediate delivery.
One last thing before we wrap, and I just wanted to share something, a sentiment that was shared with me by more than one subscriber and client over the past week since we last talked, and that was to please tell Andy that we see him as a modern-day prophet for the good of the people, trying to help people to wake up and rise up and to take care of their families and their futures. And they know that you come from the heart. And they're in the live chats during the Tuesday night last week. The people put all these little flame icons in there. They say, "Preach it, Andy, preach it." So they know you're coming from the heart, and your sincerity and your authenticity shine through. And that's something that's continued to make an impression on them. I'm passing that along because people asking me explicitly to let you know that.
I can't tell you how much I appreciate that. There are friends of mine, I'm not going to mention any names within this industry, who I know have had a very difficult time in that the things that they talk about, which fundamentally are backed in so many respects with so much logic and so much in the way of mathematics and economics and just sound advice, but it doesn't play out, where there's a disconnection between logic and outcome. And it's affected them. Someone who used to work for me, even who wrote our newsletter, I think it broke him in many ways, and he left the industry. And it's challenging sometimes, Dunnigan, because, I wish I could just say to people, look, I do all of this myself. I hope they believe me. I do. And these are very, very challenging times. If you take a step back and realize that this is arguably the ninth inning for the West, from a standpoint of historical context of world reserve currencies, never being more than 100 years, certainly, and most of them 40 to 50 years. We left the gold standard over 50 years ago. Are we living on borrowed time? We've been literally since the end of World War II. And if you take the West into the equation, for hundreds of years, the West has ruled the roost. But it just seems as though, in my feeling, that we are entering the end stages of this Keynesian experiment, an experiment based upon massive debt accumulation, by higher taxes, by inflation, by a system that's broken. And I think that, for me, taking accountability means getting out of the way of this broken system. And when I look back, and I thank everyone for such kind remarks, because it does weigh on me. I mean, I spend an awful lot of time trying to come up with something that's coherent and has a logic attributed to it that leads to an outcome that I see. And doesn't mean I'm right. I feel like I am. I'm basing my family's and my own personal decisions upon that, and telling you out there, this is what I see. And it's heavy. It's hard. But I think these are times where a lot of people, most people in this country, who wouldn't even listen to the message that I'm talking about, if things happen the way that I think they will, are going to be hurt and going to be caught in a very precarious position. So for what it's worth, I thank everyone out there for saying such kind words. And I don't know that I'm much of a prophet, just someone who cares a lot about being honest and being truthful and trying to help as many people as I can. Yes, I have a business to run, and I want to see that flourish, maybe give it to my kids someday. Seeing as that I started from nothing when I was 19 years old, it's a great accomplishment. And, there's no easy way around it. So for what it's worth, I appreciate it more than Dunnigan, and more than anyone out there knows. It means a lot to me. So thank you. I'll keep doing the best I can to bring the news as I see it to the public. And for those who are listening and getting something from it, I appreciate it. And we'll keep fighting the fight together and see where we end up. Hopefully we don't just survive. Maybe even there's a chance that we thrive. And that's what I'm hoping for. So again, thank you very much. It means a lot.
Means a lot to all of us too, Andy. And folks, so that you don't miss a single interview with Andy or any of our guests, make sure you go to get on our mailing list, you'll get one email a day in your inbox with our latest interview and any specials. And that's by going to libertyandfinance.com, putting in your name, your email address, click submit, and make sure you acknowledge and confirm the email confirmation. Then you're in after that. So at libertyandfinance.com is where you can get on our mailing list. Andy, as always, on behalf of all of our viewers, thanks for joining us here on Liberty and Finance.
Would never miss it done again. It's my favorite day of the week. So you stay well, and until next week, I'm sure there'll be something crazy to talk about then too. So stay well and have a great day.
You too.
Miles Franklin Precious Metals is one of America's oldest and most trusted bullion dealers. Miles Franklin is A+ rated and accredited by the Better Business Bureau, licensed and bonded, and has 0 complaints ever registered. Here at Liberty and Finance, we are licensed brokers with Miles Franklin. To order, simply call us, discuss your needs, and we will let you know our live inventory, prices, and availability, and lock in your order over the phone. Once your order is locked, the price is held for you regardless of market fluctuations, and the metals are reserved for you awaiting your settled payment. Within 1 business day of ordering, you will receive an email invoice detailing the order and payment instructions. Miles Franklin accepts payments by bank wire, ACH or electronic check, money order, check mailed priority mail, and cryptocurrency. The fastest forms of payment are bank wire and cryptocurrency. Upon settled payment, metals will ship out within 3 to 5 business days. You will receive tracking information via email. Domestic shipping charges are $15 for any order under 500 ounces of silver or 10 ounces of gold. For orders larger than that, domestic shipping is free. The package will be double boxed, fully insured, and labeled discreetly, with no indication of the contents inside. For your privacy, the name Miles Franklin will not even be on the package. To talk to myself, Elijah, my brother Kaiser, or my father Dunnigan, call 1-888-81-LIBERTY. That's 1-888-815-4237.